Welcome back to this series on INFJ and ISTP relationships and part 2 of this episode, where we are talking about troubles that INFJs and ISTPs tend to have in a relationship together. So if you haven't watched part 1 of this episode, then please do so that you will know what I'm talking about in this video. In part 1, we discussed the nature of some of the problems that tend to occur in an INFJ-ISTP relationship as a result of these two personality differences. And then today's video is going to discuss the remedy for those frequently occurring problems. So let's get started. In part 1 of this episode, I said that the most prominent problem in INFJ-ISTP relationships is the management of expectations and responsibilities. I talked about how INFJs are an I dominant, and we tend to have idealizations of how things ought to be, and we can tend to get fixated on those idealizations, whereas our ISTPs are the complete opposite. They have secondary SE, so they're all about just living in the moment, and they can't stand to be confined to rules or expectations. So this core of who we are as individuals will make us clash when we come together. Again, go watch part 1 if you want to explore the core of this problem. So my recommendation for the remedy to this pattern of conflict is INFJs, manage your expectations. It's definitely easier said than done. We are perfectionists with high expectations by nature. But like our good old Greek friend Socrates said, know thyself. Know that this is your tendency, and when you know and you can admit to yourself that you can tend to be overly perfectionistic, and we can sometimes project this need for perfectionism on those around us, then you will have a little more grace and a little more forgiveness for those around you, including your ISTP partner. I know that I used to be really hard on my ISTP husband when things didn't go how I wanted, when I wanted, because I had a plan, and things need to go according to plan. Otherwise, more things will fall apart, and then everything will just be a huge mess. But finding out that I was an INFJ and that I just tend to have really high expectations, it has helped me to let go and be more gracious towards my husband and not hold him to my expectations. I know that there are a lot of things that I expect for him for good and practical reasons, and they are completely reasonable, like pick up after yourself, stop leaving your socks by the door, things like that. But also remembering that my need for perfectionism should not hold precedence over my relationship with my husband. It has really helped me to let go. For the ISTPs, same kind of advice: know thyself. Know that it is your tendency to be spontaneous and to not be really good with following through on responsibilities. Sometimes, yes, your INFJ may have just some high and unrealistic expectation, but that's not the case all the time. Half the time the INFJ is asking completely realistic things of you, and they're just needing you to be responsible and help them and uphold your end. One of my last talking points in my last video was about how ISTPs have inferior extroverted sensing, so you guys can tend to take the words of others harder than what it was meant. Don't get mad at me for saying this, but it's true. If you believe in the theories of Myers-Briggs type indicator, then don't listen to me, just look at your cognitive stack and it will speak for itself. Inferior extroverted feeling makes you guys not understand others or their intentions well. So the INFJ can say something as simple as, please close the kitchen cabinets if you're not using them. And you ISTPs can tend to misconstrue this as criticism or as an attack, when it's just A simple truth, kitchen cabinets are meant to be closed when they're not in use. Like, why are you gonna get mad at someone for telling you to do something that you should already be doing? My husband and I have gotten into plenty of fights when it comes to me telling him to do things that he should have already been doing, and it was almost so common sense that it was almost kind of like he got mad at me because it seemed like I was insulting his intelligence by going after him about something that was just so common sense. So ISTPs, do not write your INFJs off as unrealistic. Don't take everything as an attack. Have a look at yourself. And if your INFJ is telling you to do something that you should already be doing, then you can't get mad. Do the things that you know you're supposed to do. Don't do the things that you know you're not supposed to do. Know your tendencies. Admit when you did something that you know you shouldn't have done. And then don't get mad at the INFJ when she calls you out on it. Number 2, the second most prominent problem in INFJ-ISTP relationships that I discussed in part 1 of this episode is the INFJ and ISTP's different priority for romance. INFJs are introverted, intuition dominant with secondary extroverted feeling, so they're super romantic and they are in love with the idea of love. But ISTPs are introverted, thinking dominant, and extroverted feeling inferior. So they're all about logic. Having to manage extroverted feeling feels unnecessary and almost like a burden. So go back to part 1 to listen to a more in-depth discussion about this topic, but let's talk about the remedy. Sorry INFJs and sorry all F-types, but you're just going to have to tell your T-type partner when you want those displays of affection. The reason why men are stereotypically depicted as these emotionless, strong, calm, silent, rational beings is because somewhere around 60% of men are T-types, meaning that they value logic and rationale more than feelings. And the reason why women are stereotypically depicted as these emotional, needy beings is because 75% of women are F-types, meaning they value feelings more than logic and rationale. So more often than not, especially in heterosexual relationships, one person will be the T-type, usually the man, and the other will be the F-type, usually the woman. And even when the man is an F-type, F-type men tend to be attracted to T-type women. So you F-types, you will just have to tell your T-type partner when you want those displays of affection. It sucks and it feels like it doesn't count anymore if you have to tell them, but it is better than being starved of affection and then holding bitterness or resentment and then just having your relationship waste away over a lack of communication. And then when you tell your T-type partner, please take me on a date, or please watch this rom-com with me, they're going to come through doing a terrible job, more than likely. And when you go on the date, he won't think to bring flowers, or he won't open the door, or he won't pull up the chair, or when you curl up and watch that rom-com together, he's going to be complaining every 10 seconds. But you have to really butter him up, make a huge deal out of it, saying it's so sweet and you've missed so much spending time with him and he's better looking than the main guy in the rom-com. But whatever you do, do not criticize his attempt at being romantic. If we are talking about these 60% of guys who are T-types, being romantic doesn't come naturally to them. So when they extend those little gestures of romance, they're putting themselves out there for you. So if you are anything other than over the moon grateful and smitten by their attempt, they may shut down and never want to try again. Do not say things like, I would have picked a different restaurant, or, well, it only took you a million years to take me on a date. Also, don't remind them that the romantic gesture was your idea. You chose the restaurant I recommended. Good job. Sorry, F-types, but we're just going to have to tell them when we want those displays of affection, and then be realistic and be prepared for the fact that they may not be very good at it whenever they come through. But the hopeful news is that learning your love language is a process. It may happen slowly, but with practice, your partner will get the hang of it. So continue to teach them your love language and trust that over time they will get it down. For the ISTPs, your remedy is know your INFJ's love language. Know what makes them feel loved. We know that you are TI dominant and emotions aren't really the thing that's on your mind, but if you love your INFJ, you need to know that love and romance is such an essential thing to them, and to brush it off as unnecessary or nonsensical is to deprive them of something that is very important to them. So make it a goal to do just one tiny romantic gesture a day for your INFJ. It can be something as small as kissing them as they're coming down the hallway, or saying you look nice today. It can be picking a flower on your way into the house and giving it to them. It can be a weed and the INFJ will be gushing all over it. If you're fearing that it's going to be too cheesy, remember that INFJs are hopeless romantics, and there is nothing, almost nothing, that they will find cheesy. They will want to eat up all that cheese. Also make a mental note of how they react to different gestures of love, and then build on the things to which they had a grander reaction. So maybe they didn't care too much whenever you reached out and hugged them, but then they got all gushy when you told them that they look nice. So then that tells you that their love language leans more towards words of affirmation. And also ISTPs, you guys will unintentionally come up with every excuse in the book to not do these little gestures. You'll be thinking, I could tell them that they look nice, but that's so small and therefore insignificant, so I'm just not going to waste my time. Or, nah, that's just too cheesy, I'm not going to do it. Or, I'm busy right now. There will always be a reason to not do something. But ISTPs, when you repeatedly make excuses, you'll one day suddenly realize that it's been years and you haven't done a single romantic thing for your INFJ. So stop making excuses and just do it when you remember to do it. ISTPs, if you guys want to learn more about how to display affection, then two sources that I highly recommend are Gary Chapman's book, The 5 Love Languages, or John Gottman's lecture on making marriage work, which is applicable to people who are just dating too. But don't forget those displays of affection. It can really make or break your relationship. So the third problem that I discussed in part 1 of this episode surrounds how ISTPs can tend to be quick to take offense due to their inferior extroverted feeling. Inferior extroverted feeling will make the ISTP not understand the intentions of others well. So in a relationship, the ISTP can be quick to take offense to things that their partner says. This is exacerbated by the fact that INFJs tend to be overly perfectionistic and can unintentionally project this need for perfectionism on the ISTP and just have one too many suggestions on what needs to be done, how it needs to be done, when it needs to be done. So the ISTP with their inferior extroverted feeling can tend to have a black and white take on FE, and any degree of disagreement from the INFJ as to what the ISTP is doing, no matter how well intended or how tenderly addressed, can be seen as an attack or as criticism by the ISTP. So ISTPs, again, know thyself. Know that it is your tendency to take things harder than what it was meant. Know that not everything is an attack. Know that your INFJ's intention is not to nag you. You are in a relationship with them, so they should be able to come to you about things, even if it's something as small or petty as from our example earlier. Please stop leaving the kitchen cabinets open. If you have a good reason for not closing the kitchen cabinets, then let your INFJ know. You guys can make this thing called a compromise. Just because you disagree with what they say or they disagree with what you do, it doesn't have to equate to a fight. No offense to ISTPs, I'm not saying this to make fun of you guys. I'm saying this because I see this from my ISTP husband too, but you guys tend to be quick to get defensive, and you tend to have black and white thinking when it comes to receiving any sort of feedback, and you think that disagreements automatically equates to fighting and automatically indicates that there's something wrong with your relationship or that there's something wrong with your partner, when that's not the case at all. If you and your partner don't agree on something, you don't have to fight. You can compromise. It will require talking, which I know that you guys aren't great at, because the ISTP's brain is wired to think of everything in terms of making things work mechanically. You set something up and then you just take for granted that if the setup is correct, then things should just work and there shouldn't be any question about it. But your INFJ is a human and they have human needs, and it's a little bit more complicated than just mechanics, just setting something up and then just taking for granted that it's just going to work. You have to deal with them on an emotional level. Hear what they're trying to say, try to figure out where they're coming from, and try to figure out what you can each do on your own ends to make things work out for the both of you. Try not to take offense to things and try to listen to understand instead of listening just to respond. And then INFJs, know that your ISTP may be a very logical person with little priority for emotion, but they're actually very sensitive and they don't understand emotions well, and they will take things harsher than what was intended. So remember that ISTPs usually become attracted to INFJs in the first place because of our ability to be very warm and kind with our FE. So when we aren't being very consistent with our FE and we're suddenly just like, here, do this, they're gonna be taken aback and be a little confused and be almost kind of repulsed by us and wondering what happened to that warm, gentle FE that I used to see. So if you have something that you need to address with the ISTP, remember to find a kind and non-confrontational way to say it. ISTPs will swear up and down that they don't care for us to sugarcoat things for them, but that is kind of what they need. It'll definitely be easier said than done, because if your ISTP is anything like my ISTP, you can say something 10 times sugar-coated with 10 layers of buttercream icing with a cherry on top, and they won't hear a single thing that you said. But then as soon as you start to get slightly stern, then suddenly they're like, why are you nagging me? And you're like the worst person in the world. I get it. But you guys need to be upfront about your communication styles. Ask one another, if there is something that you're doing that I don't like, how do you want me to address it with you? Do you want me to tell you face to face? Do you want me to tell you in a letter? Do you want me to show you how I prefer you to do it? Knowing these things ahead of time so that you know how to go about these situations whenever they arise, it'll save you a lot of arguments in the future, if you're into that kind of stuff. So in part 1, we also talked about how inferior extroverted feeling and a poor understanding of extroverted feeling can tend to make ISTPs suspicious and jealous partners. Don't get offended by me saying this, and go watch part 1 for my full explanation. Again, ISTPs can tend to have black and white thinking about extroverted feeling, and since INFJs have secondary extroverted feeling, then they're naturally just going to be very friendly friendly, and they'll be FE with everyone. And then the ISTP will be like, well, she's being nice to that guy, so that must mean that she likes him. So let's talk about the remedy. So INFJs, as humans, people tend to think that others are like them. So ISTPs are pretty private people, and they don't put their emotions on display. And when they do, then you know it's kind of serious. And they think that people are like them, that people don't display emotions unless it means something. So that's why they're really quick to suspect that when we are being FE, that we are flirting, or that we are prioritizing others over them. Even when we are literally just being nice. You can say to the cashier, have a nice day, and then when you guys get to the car, your ISTP will be like, you liked him, didn't you? Sometimes you guys will have to put in some work to help the ISTP regulate his trust issues, or seek counseling if it's very severe. But otherwise, bear in mind that ISTPs do not understand FE well. So know that you really have to make sure that your ISTP knows that he is your priority. Be more FE with him than with anyone else, and be aware of how FE you are being to others. Yes, it's second nature to us to produce FE, but if you love your ISTP and if they are your priority, then it's not self-sacrificing to do what puts your ISTP at ease. You're not being manipulated. You're not being controlled. If you love your ISTP, tone down the FE towards others and maximize the FE towards him. It's the equivalent of asking your ISTP to tone down his SE, since SE is their secondary function and FE is ours. So if you want him to stop being so adventurous all the time and just stay home with you once in a while, then you can stop being FE all the time, and just save that for him. Relationships are about compromise. As for the ISTPs, I feel for you guys. You guys are completely within your nature to be a little suspicious, because it's just how your personality algorithm goes. And I don't say that in a bad way. I'm not saying it's your fault, and I'm not going to sit here and gaslight you and say you're just being too damn jealous all the time, because your partner may or may not be intentionally flirting. And I know that there have probably got to be some ISTPs out there who were suspicious of their partner, and their partner gaslighted them into thinking that they were just overthinking it, and then their partner really did end up cheating on them. Because ISTPs can't read others' intentions well. So ISTPs, you guys can be suspicious, fine, but express that in a healthy way. Ask your partner for assurance if you need it, and don't just get mad and don't just get accusatory. If you go to your partner about something like, I think that you and that guy at the party were just getting a little bit too close to one another, watch your tone and try not to come off as accusatory. Your INFJ will almost always automatically come off with, no, I wasn't. But tell them how it made you feel. Feelings are the language that INFJs speak. It made me feel like you were giving him more attention than me. It made me feel like he was really into you and that he was trying to flirt with you. INFJs will be less willing to listen to your accusations, but more willing to listen to how you feel. So I know you ISTPs are not good at understanding feelings, but this is the healthy way to go about it if you're suspicious of your INFJ rather than just getting mad. In part 1 of this video, the 5th problem that we discussed was the different energy levels of the INFJ versus the ISTP. ISTPs have secondary SE, so they will almost always be up for a new adventure, but INFJs are NI dominant and SE inferior, so they love to daydream, and having to go out and do things is just draining to us. Watch part 1 to hear a little bit more about the root of this problem, but let's talk about how to resolve this frequently occurring issue. So I really only have one remedy for this issue, and it addresses both both the INFJ and ISTP. So you guys will have to make compromises. ISTP, remember that sensory things can be really draining to the INFJ and make us really anxious. And then INFJs, remember that SE is the ISTP's secondary function, so it's very important to them to regularly get some sort of sensory experience. So maybe you guys can come up with some sort of schedule on when you do the SE thing versus when maybe you stay home. Like maybe one weekend the INFJ gets to choose what you guys do, and then the next weekend the ISTP gets to choose what you guys do, or on Saturdays the ISTP gets to choose what you guys do, and then on Sunday the INFJ gets to choose. Find a system that works for you guys so that both of your energy levels will be considered, or else you'll end up with an ISTP who feels dead inside from not being able to regularly get sensory input, or you'll end up with an INFJ who has panic attacks and is irritable and anxious because they don't get that alone time that we INFJs so desperately need. I am not making this up. INFJs need alone time. Being alone with our thoughts is super important. It helps us to recharge. Continually press an INFJ to get out and go do stuff, and you will see us crumble. If you really want to do something on the weekend, remember that INFJs like to plan, and we don't like spontaneity, especially when it comes to extroverting ourselves. So maybe text your INFJ on Friday morning and be like, what do you want to do this weekend? The INFJ will automatically go into planning mode and start planning out a few different things that you guys can do, and then bam, you guys have plans for the weekend. Which brings me to my next point. Number 6, INFJs and ISTPs have different planning styles. INFJs need to plan ahead to maximize their time and energy and optimize their efficiency, but ISTPs need flexibility to be spontaneous. So these two will bump heads because of this. Let's talk about the remedy. So again, this remedy addresses the both of you, and this remedy sounds a little funny, but ISTPs, you can tell your INFJ to plan to not plan. So what do I mean by this? Well, if this is in regards to something that the INFJ really wants to do, then sorry ISTPs, but you will not win. Let that INFJ plan. But if it's something that's not a big deal, like the weekend is coming up, or you guys are going to the beach for a couple of days, or you, the ISTP, don't want to plan and you just want to be able to go with the flow, then tell your INFJ ahead of time to plan to not plan. Just say, if you don't mind, can you not make any plans so that we can just do whatever is good? Chances are the INFJ may not mind too much. If they do mind, then they may just be a little bit irked, but I think that they will understand. I've said before in my other videos on my husband and my past vacations, I had things planned down to the last minute, and my husband was so annoyed at how I kept hurting him along, and I was annoyed at how he kept dragging his feet. But now that we've been married for a while, and knowing that he can't stand to be stuck to a schedule, when I plan our itineraries, I make sure to leave some time in there for us to just be spontaneous. Like when we went to Hawaii, I planned all of our excursions and stuff during the day, but then I left our evenings open so that we could just, you know, go to the beach or go do some nightlife. And then on our last day, I just planned a trip up to Oahu's North Shore, but I only had a couple of things planned for us on that day. But for the majority of the day, we were just being spontaneous. We just got there and we just did whatever was good. We beach hopped a little bit, and then ended up driving clear across the island. And I do have to say, ISTPs, even though you guys hate our incessant need to plan, you gotta admit that we INFJs can make a lot of really good things happen because of our planning. Like if my husband husband and I had gone to Hawaii and just did whatever spontaneously, we wouldn't have been able to do half as much as we did. It was because I researched ahead of time. I figured out the days and times when everything opened and when they closed. I researched where everything was located and how we could hit the most number of spots at once. We were able to do a ton of stuff in Hawaii, but ISTPs, if you really do not want a plan, tell your INFJ to plan to not plan. Another problem that INFJs and ISTPs will have in a relationship together is the INFJs need to have their homes clean because of their inferior extroverted sensing, but ISTPs have higher extroverted sensing, so they're not bothered by messes, and they tend to be crafty people, so they can tend to have a lot of tools and projects laying around, so this can create conflicts between the INFJ and ISTP. So this is another remedy that addresses the both of you. My recommendation is for you each to have your own space where the other is not allowed to control. Like, the ISTP should be able to have a space where he can work and make messes as he wants to, and the INFJ should not be allowed to tell him to clean. And the INFJ should be able to have her own space where the ISTP is not allowed to bring his mess into, or where he has to clean without complaint if the INFJ tells him that he has to clean out of there. But each of these spaces need to be a place where you both don't have to regularly operate out of. So it probably should not be the bedroom, because both of you guys have to share the bedroom, and it shouldn't be like the kitchen because both of you guys have to use the kitchen. But like for my husband and me, I never need to go into the garage, so that is my husband's space, and that's also why it's the nastiest room in the house. But he has all his tools and junk in there, and I am not allowed to go in there and fuss at him about it. But my space is the living room, because my husband has no business operating out of the living room. It's where I can escape to in the case that the bedroom is messy, the kitchen is messy, everywhere is messy. I can come to the living room to temporarily escape all of the mess, and my husband is not allowed to bring his junk into the living room because it's my aesthetically pleasing place. And then as for the rest of the rooms, you guys will just have to set some ground rules and then respect one another's rules. I understand it can be frustrating. Another issue that tends to occur in INFJ-ISTP relationships comes from the fact that INFJs can tend to be really forgetful. We are NI dominant as E inferior, so we can be so mentally distracted that we can forget small but very crucial things. Like, we can forget to turn off the stove and just walk away, or we will lock our keys in the car. As for the remedy, I say this semi in vain, but INFJs try to be accountable. I know it is moo advice.
This is all a moo point.
Huh. A moo point?
Yeah, it's like a cow's opinion. It just doesn't matter. It's moo.
Because as a very scattered-brained INFJ myself, I know that all of these times when I got myself and my husband into trouble because of my forgetfulness, it was an accident, and it's not like I was being forgetful as some sort of joke. But try to bear in mind that whenever you lose your phone and you have to pay $1,000 for a new one, or when you accidentally burn down your kitchen because you forgot to turn off the stove, God forbid, know that your ISTP has to suffer alongside you, and that's not fair. So try to stay mindful. It's important not just for your mental health and for your life and safety and finances, but for your ISTP too. As for you ISTPs, I apologize in advance for us INFJs, but know ahead of time that your INFJ's tendency is to be a little forgetful and a little accident prone. And then be prepared to give us a lot of grace for it. If you are the type to be very hard on someone over accidents, then you probably don't want to get into a relationship with an INFJ. But ISTPs, you guys are good problem solvers and you have a good head on your shoulders. So you guys have always been good at providing real life solutions for us INFJs. So we ask kindly that you guys please help us to stay accountable. Like my husband knows it about me to always ask if I have locked the doors at night, because Lord knows that I will take the dog out and then we will both come back in and I will forget to lock the door behind me. And he knows to always ask if I have grabbed my phone before we leave the house, because he has had to turn the car around way too many times because we were on the road and then I was suddenly like, oh, I forgot my phone. So ISTPs, be prepared to deal with our constant forgetfulness and be prepared to be the one to help keep us accountable. Thank you and sorry. In the first part of this episode, we also talked about how INFJs and ISTPs aren't both great about doing chores. So this can cause a lot of resentment between the two of them, and it's a petty point, but it is worth talking about. So the remedy to this is just suck it up and do the chores. You guys will have to establish what are the expectations for completing the chores, who does what chore and when, so that there isn't a gray area over which you guys are going to perpetually fight. Like some of the things that my husband and I have had to establish in our homes is things like no toys on the floor. Whichever one of us is with our son, if he gets toys on the floor on our watch, we have to be the ones to either make him clean it up or we have to clean it up. We've also established rules like no clothes on top of the dressers. They have to be in the dressers. So rules like that. When you first bring it up to your partner, they're going to not really take you seriously and they're going to continue to slip up. But if it really bothers you and you're serious about your partner following through, then, you know, be sure you let them know, and you guys will continue to slip up and you guys will continue to argue. But establishing the designation of chores in order to have a cleanly home will be a process. It's not something that is going to happen overnight. So be prepared for this to be a particular issue. So the last point that we discussed in part 1 of this episode is the difference in decision-making styles of the INFJ and ISTP. INFJs make decisions based on feelings and their overall impression of something, and ISTPs make decisions based off of logic and more fine details. And then also INFJs can be more decisive but then make impulsive decisions, whereas ISTPs can tend to drag their feet when making decisions and then actually never converge on a decision. One decision-making style isn't necessarily better than the other. There are pros and cons to both decision-making styles, so I really don't have a remedy for this one. When it comes to making decisions together, especially when it comes to making big decisions like buying a car or purchasing a home, you guys will just have to take it on a case-by-case basis and listen to one another's reasons and points of views, and just be aware ahead of time that this difference in decision-making styles will make you guys clash in the future. And be prepared for it, and be kind and be respectful when your decisions do not align so well. So that is the end of this 2-part episode on troubles that INFJs and ISTPs will have in a relationship together. I have paraphrased Dr. John Gottman in my videos before, but I am going to do it again. In Dr. John Gottman's research about relationships, he found that approximately 75% of problems in a relationship are perpetual, meaning they never get solved, and you will continue to fight those petty fights for the rest of your life. But relationships are not sustainable because of a lack of problems. They are sustainable because of the couple's ability to manage those conflicts. So the presence of conflicts does not mean that you and your INFJ or you and your ISTP are wrong for each other. It is normal and healthy to have conflicts, and despite the presence of conflicts, INFJs and ISTPs do have a lot of strengths as a couple. So hang in there, INFJs and ISTPs. We will make it together. If you haven't watched my other videos in this series on INFJ and ISTP relationships, then please do so, and look out for more of my videos in this series that are going to be coming up soon. So I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.